You're on the podcast with Dino and Ash. How was your morning, Ashley?
Crazy. There's chaos all around.
So we've been doing the podcast. We've been like trying to shove one in every morning after the kids leave. And I don't know if you have kids or not, but maybe your house is perfect when the kids leave the house, but ours is always chaos. So we're trying to work on the whole, hey children, let's have a little bit more of a calm morning here.
Routine. Get things cleaned up.
Don't wait till the last minute.
Time management.
Enthusiasm.
Joy.
I feel like I got a hot take, but I don't want to throw mine out. If you have a hot take,
I don't have one.
It's really important while dreaming with your spouse to come up with like a common vision, a goal that you're working towards as a couple. But I think equivalently, I have found insane amounts of benefit in my own personal life and walk and things like that when I've had I've done the exact same thing at a personal level. So I have month goals at all holistic aspects of my walk and my life. I have year goals, 10-year goals, like long-term goals. Like I kind of like have it staggered out. I know where I'm going as an individual as well. And I know the direction I want to be going down. And I'm constantly assessing, are the things that I'm doing in line with the direction I want to be going down? And the compromises or the things that I'm like trying to like reap, are they temporal? Are they right now? Or are they moving me towards my long-term goal? Because again, I'm going to say it like probably 1,000 times on this podcast, but the definition of discipline is forfeiting what I want right now for what I want most. Or instead of going after what I want right now, I go after what I want most. So having a clear vision for what you as an individual want most is insanely important. And then at the same time, self-assessing like, hey, are my actions, are the things that I'm doing in my life, are they actually something that are moving me towards these goals that I have in life?
And this is kind of going off of, the second part of what we were talking about yesterday, which was, setting a vision together and how to do that, how to dream together, how to set goals together as a couple. And now this is more just going off of kind of the second part to that. There's a few different branches off of that one, but one of them specifically was this, setting a personal.
Yeah. What personal goals should I have based on the goals that my spouse and I have put together, right? We come together and Ash and I have these common goals. And one of the things together is like, hey, we want depth of physical intimacy, or we want depth of emotional intimacy together. Well, okay, to get there, me as an individual, I have to also then have personal goals that can get me in that, push me down that direction as well. So for example, if I really do want like Ash wants me to be more emotionally connected with her, that to me means, okay, I have to do specific things to help bond us closer together emotionally. That means that I have to like spend more time like thinking about the way that I'm feeling so I can articulate it to her so that we can have that emotional connection that she so longs for, right? Yes, there's absolutely vision that we should be creating together, but equivalently, you are still an individual and need to be able to have personal responsibility for your own actions. And that means you guys should have your own goals that you're pushing for.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's going to be frustrating too if you are constantly looking at your spouse's goals or what they should be doing.
Yeah.
You're going to be frustrated because they're never going to do it to the level or the pace or the perfection that you're going to set that bar for them. Yeah. So it is better to have your own as well, so you can be focusing on that, because really we want for us to be better. I have to also work on myself. Dino has to work on his self.
Today is a little bit about aspects of sacrifice. And the first big sacrifice is removing the sin from your marriage. Mm-hmm. I can personally kind of attest to this as a man. I think that I'm probably going to have the most common man-based, sin that I've had to come to you for many a times is that visual lust scenario. And I've had to come to you and be like, hey, I'm in a scenario here. I've made mistakes and I've messed up on things like that.
And I think with that specifically, that's going to look different for every marriage and everybody's past, and however you deal with that. In our marriage, we have chosen to just be open and honest with one another fully. I want to know everything, and it's not like I need to know everything so I can make you feel guilty. I want him to feel like he can come to me and tell me things. I do not hold it over his head. It is not something that, burdens me or makes me insecure. I want him to have a safe place to tell me. And I feel like for us too, if he can feel that he can be open and honest with me, and plus I can read him like a book, so I know when there's something there. You have no choice. But I also feel like it allows for just, there's like a freedom in that he can tell me freely. And then also that he knows that I'm going to forgive him, of course. I don't know, maybe you not wanting to do it too. Like it is
Absolutely.
also in
It's
your
a
head,
barrier,
'cause
for sure.
you have an accountability with me, you know, so you know, like, oh, okay, if I go down that path, I will be telling Ash. So a lot of, I know men and women, but men specifically have that with other men or pastors or whatever it is. In our marriage, we just choose to have that with one another.
Yeah. And maybe we should preface this with like, Ash and I live under the paradigm that for me, the only person visually I should be lusting after is her, period, hard stop. It's actually kind of interesting because for a long time in our marriage, I had this mentality of like, I have to constantly just fight a war over here and push everything away. And in recent times, I basically come to a totally different kind of mentality that's given me an ability to kind of shift the battle and like shift the way that I think about it. And it comes down to this, that when I was younger in the dating world, my mind was set to what do I like? And I was constantly visually looking around like, oh, I like this aspect of this girl, or I like this, or I like this, and I like this, right? And it was a constant variety of things. And then once you get married, that stops. You've literally created neural pathways that are set up in your brain to function certain ways, and then you have to create completely new pathways. And I didn't really understand that, first and foremost. But then also, I didn't understand the mechanics of how God has designed it inside the context of marriage and the benefits of it. So now the way that I basically structure this and look at this as a man is that if Ash is my drug, because ultimately it is a drug, there's a chemical aspect to it. Like there's dopamine release by just like if I have any kind of like visual stimulation off of her, or ultimately like any visual stimulation from a female. If that is a drug, and she is the drug that I'm allowed to basically have, then I want that drug in its most purest form. And anytime I have a variation of that drug, it dilutes the correct, most right one. I don't want to have diluted. I don't want it diluted. I want it in its like most purest, amazing form. So that completely shifted my mentality. It made me go from like, oh, I have to like constantly pushing away these other things that my brain has been constantly accustomed to, oh no, I only want the good stuff. I only want like,
and that's how you take your sex life to 11.
I'm just saying like,
oh no.
Yeah. Like, because for me, what it was like, especially in those early years, I loved you and I lusted after you, but at the same time, I wasn't overly like aggressive towards you.
Yeah, I know.
It was only in the last like 8 years or so when I have shifted the way that I think to be like, oh, this is different. And what that does is it unlocks something. It totally shifts the way that you think. In making Ash the sole person that I really want to be focusing after, it has made me just so much more fulfilled. Like, it's funny, the world tells you that you should go out there as guys, just bang as many girls as you want, or as many as you can kind of thing. And that makes you happy and that brings joy. And it's just such a lie. I remember having a conversation with a friend's friend, and he was like this super promiscuous guy. I'm on the other side of the spectrum where Ash is the only person I've ever been with, period. I was a virgin when we got married. We were kind of going back and forth. And earlier in my marriage, it didn't click. And then I've matured in our marriage, and I've watched him follow the logical conclusion of a promiscuous lifestyle. And me then as well follow the logical conclusion of a single honed in relationship. And I can definitively say I have a much better sex life than this guy does. Way better. Because there's no intimacy. The intimacy you get, the like depth of like closeness that you get in your sexual relationship when you have isolated that like outlet to just one thing is definitively 1 million times better than anything else.
You can't have any vulnerability either.
No. It's by design. God designed it in a specific way, and you can't try and shoehorn in another working mechanism into a design that's basically been set up.
There's no depth of intimacy in those one night stands or anything like that.
No.
But even like beyond that, in the context of marriage, and then having that like lustful eye for other things, you are going to still lack that depth of intimacy because your focus is not solely on your spouse.
Yeah.
It's wandering to other things.
Yeah.
So you're constantly going to be thinking about other things.
Yeah.
When you should be focused on one.
Yeah. So one of the other big ones that I want to throw out there for men is high walls. And this is a common paradigm. So there's like, hey, this is a better way. And you should be confessing the sin in your life to your spouse at a granular level. I actually go into her and confess when I feel like I'm being just tempted. It's not a confession. It's just like, hey, I need to be really honest with you. I can tell right now I'm getting hit from like multiple angles. Stuff's popping up on my computer. I'm walking around, town, and there's stuff in my face or whatever. And I just go to her. I'm like, I'm just very interested in having a zero tally. I do not want to create this debt that I've built up. I keep it at zero. My book is at zero on the regular. It's not just because I'm supposed to like not do these things, that legalistic aspect of it. If I'm being totally honest, it's fully self-serving. I want the good stuff. Yeah. I want the good stuff, and I want that very close relationship with you.
Yeah. And there's a benefit for this openness and doing things these ways as well, because I don't take things as a personal offense, when he tells me things. Like I said, the world is looking at men as they're just the worst. They're the devil, they're the worst, they are too sexual, all these things. And man, I'm raising boys right now, and it terrifies me for them because I want them to be strong, godly men that feel confident and that feel like, I want Dino to feel like I, give him like strength, and I support him, and I love him, and I adore him, and all these things. So I want him to feel safe also, to be able to come to me and be vulnerable with me and be able to communicate these things with me. And that also means that when he does, that I'm not like, what, you don't love me now? It's not a personal offense, but understanding what is going on inside, loving them through it, and then working through it together.
Yeah. I'm curious. I would wager that most women are not where you're currently at.
I mean, you can tell me. I do feel like for the majority of our marriage, I have been mostly like this. Now, have there been times of insecurities? Of course. And as I've gotten older, and you and I have gotten, more into this depth of intimacy, the security is so much greater than it was before. I could handle a lot more than probably before.
What would you say to the woman that basically does have a harder time with it?
Yeah. Well, it's hard because there's so many different things. I don't know the ins and outs of everybody's marriage. I don't know how your spouse talks to you or treats you. And
and there's obviously an insane amount of nuance here. It could be something like along the lines of like real infidelity. Kind of thing,
yes, of course.
Like
so it's not like there's just like, one solution or one answer. That's why we're saying these are the things that worked for us. And we're trying to show how you can get to a point where you can be more in this spot, where you can be more open and more vulnerable. Now, that doesn't mean that right away you go to your husband and say, hey, can you tell me, I want you to be open and honest with me with everything. And they tell you everything. And that doesn't mean you're not allowed to be emotional or, hurt by it. Like, it's okay to have those feelings. Yeah. Again, going back to just getting to a point where you're both working together, both trying to have the same mindset and same goal, so that when you have these conversations, I can hear you, I can listen to what you're saying, and I know where you're trying to go. This is why setting these goals and setting these visions for one another, like, these are one of the things. Let's confess our sins to one another. Let's confess them to God. Ask God to reveal what's going on in our life, and let's work through those things. So those are out of the way. Now, those are in the past because God's forgiven us. We've forgiven one another. Now let's move forward together. What do we want? Like, I want a marriage where I can communicate to you. I would love to be able to, have a better sex life with you, whatever it is, to be able to share those things and then work towards those things together. Working as one organism, where it's like, okay, you're struggling with this right now. I want to come beside you, and I want to support you and work with you to move through this.
Yeah. I think that in times past, I'm going to give you a huge compliment on this too, though, in that in times past, if I've ever come to you, I don't think it's been like oh, no big deal. Now let's get really close together again. There's obviously like ramifications to your actions. And when you go and confess, you're dealing with the ramification. If you want to hide it, you're just basically deferring ramifications and further separating yourself from your spouse. But in times past, when I've come to you and I've done that, you have been insanely good about never coming back, bringing it back up again. And I have to encourage you ladies out there to really try and do this, your best to do this. But like,
it's so important because you bring it up once and then you might lose them for good, you know, like you got to keep that. And that's between, if you need to talk with your spouse about it, or, you know, you and the Lord, or even go to counseling. Counseling is so great for stuff, you know, no shame in counseling or seeking other, somebody else to come in and intervene, but to not hold that against them on both sides. Yeah.
In the past, obviously I've come to Ash and I've had to do this type of thing. And again, she's just been extremely, extremely gracious with me always.
And I'm not a robot either. Like,
no,
there is sadness. Like, I don't want to hear those things from Dino. You know, it's not like these, oh, it's totally fine, I'm good, you know, I'm super confident. No, like, it sucks, and I don't want that in our lives, but I also don't want that in our lives. So tell me, let's tell me it, and I'll tell him too, like, that sucks. I don't love that, you know, like I'll be honest with him too on how it makes me feel, but it's not like why would you do this? How could you do this to me? Sort of thing. Shame. It's like, you cannot bring shame into it, because that is going to cut that depth of intimacy.
It'll inhibit healing, inhibit future confession. The goal here is to basically be one organism, right? And Ash and I are going to talk a lot about that as well, because we believe, like, when you get married, the two shall become one. And the mentality here is like, why would you, if one aspect of the organism is infected and needs to be healed, all parts of the organism work together to try and heal that aspect of the thing. You don't go and self-attack. The goal here is reconciliation and growth and forward progress. Then it makes it significantly easier to move through these types of things.
Yeah, and that means with one another, you know, being supportive. Also, you know, how you speak about those things with your spouse, with your family and friends, and how you're thinking about them. All those things have an overflow into how you're going to react and act and treat. And so keeping that thing really tight, keeping your thoughts tight, keeping your words tight, and in how you want your marriage to be, how you want to view your spouse, that's how you should be thinking and speaking of them, especially when you are hurt by them. Yeah,
that is very profound, what you just said. All right, there's one other thing that kind of came to my mind on this, and that was just the importance, men, of high walls. But I want to be descriptive of what that means. High walls is, I do absolutely everything I can to keep the crap out of my life. So I do not have social media on my phone. It's been gone for years now. Like, it's just not a good idea for me to be into it, right? And I don't know what that is for you. Every guy's going to have the thing that is causing, or that could potentially cause issues. It could be a street you drive down. It could be a person you hang out with. It could be anything. Whatever that thing is, cut it out of your life. Do not allow things that cause temptation or issues or previous issues, any of that. Take a second, be real honest with yourself. Say, these are the things that are causing me issues, and I know that they are, and I'm going to remove them from my life.
And you can't think of this as being deprived of something. You are gaining so much more than you ever thought you had. You're
giving up a hot dog for a steak. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're giving up something that's really not good pointless and stupid, so that you can ultimately push towards something that's way, way, way better.
Yeah.
So again, that's one of the main reasons why Ash and I wanted to initially start off with this whole idea of, let's create a common goal together. We want you pushing towards a direction to see the good things out of this, the fruit that you're going to get out of it, not just the hard stuff. Yes, there are hard things you have to go through to get to a destination. There are the analogy of a rocky road, getting through, you know, bumps and rivers and all that kind of crap to be able to get to where you want to get to. You got to do that. The last thing you want to do is just sit there or drive in reverse while you're trying to get when you know you're wanting to get somewhere. You're just wasting your time, right?
And I think I don't want to forget about the women here as well. The high walls. It's really important for us as well. Whatever that is, it could be, the same kind, sexual kind of temptations. So shows we're watching, the books we're reading, whatever it is. But I know a lot of times for women, it can be an emotional connection you could have, and you don't even realize that you are talking with a coworker or, somebody at church or whoever it is, another man, a little bit deeper, a little bit more intimately than you do with your husband. It's really easy to do when you're not fulfilled in that area in your marriage, to do that somewhere else, and that has to have a high wall as well. It's just as important because there's just as many emotional affairs and connection that's going to separate you from your spouse and the goal that you're going after.
It's ultimately any type of sin, any kind of distraction that is going to get in the way of the two of you. Root it out and remove it. And that's the big thing that Asha, I wanted to kind of come before you guys on today, is encourage you on self-assess, be honest with yourself.
And if you don't know, or if you're are pushing down your sins so far that you're like, I don't have it. What are you talking about? I don't have anything. Man, that's when and either way, go to God and ask him to reveal whatever sin you have in your life. We do that constantly, and it's ugly, but it's also awesome.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I do that. I am like that. Yeah. And I want to know these things because I don't want to be stuck in that way. Reveal them to me so I can, move on from them, repent of them and move on, confess them and move on. Yeah. And what a freedom we have with that. But if we're just pushing it down, that is going to come up in everything. It's like just weeds, just waiting to come up in your marriage and in your life. And it overflows into your parenting, into the way you interact with your spouse, into your mood. It is the root of everything, and you got to get them out by the root.
So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Yeah, and we're going to continue this type of encouragement while also some of the harder things. We really wanted to encourage everybody today. Take a minute, self-assess on the things that you feel like, oh no, maybe I'm good on, or maybe I need to work on. Work with your spouse on it, and ultimately try and root out some of the garbage that's kind of a wall between you, because ultimately that's what all this is. It's any of these types of things we've talked about, and I'm sure there's a million other things that we didn't talk about that is sin in between a husband and a wife. Root it out. Take time, go before the Lord, beg him to be able to remove this aspect of sin in your life and in or your spouse's wife, and then work through it. Have the hard talks, have the hard conversations, do the work. It is just so worth it. You will thank us for it. You will ultimately be in a better spot with in your marriage and with your spouse because of it.
Yeah, there'll be fruit from it for sure. All right, that's a wrap for this one. We'll see you on the next podcast. And you're on the podcast with Dino and Ashley.
You doing it at the end?
I tried to get it, so I threw you.